Hi there! The Beach Boys in Concert, 1973 release. Double LP by the Beach Boys, a classic live album, probably my favorite Beach Boys live album in general, and one of my all-time favorite Beach Boys, one of my all-time favorite live albums in general. Anyway, let's just dive straight in. There's a lot of backstory with this one. You probably know most of it, so I'm not gonna bore you with everything. Last time I reviewed the Beach Boys 68 concert live album, Live in London, released in multiple different titles and cover art, so it's very confusing. But the music itself, the recording comes from 68. And before that, the officially released live album was the one from 64, titled The Beach Boys Concert, and it's very confusing with this one because it's a different release altogether. The lineup is very different. That's the original Beach Boys. They are doing their sort of garage rock and roll band thing, and set list very different, everything. Obviously they were completely in a different place in their career. The Live in London thing is great, but they do have horn players backing them, and that it's a very different sort of style that they are doing over there. It's not bad. They are performing really well. I really like that album, but over here they are very loose but also professional. The style is very at the time modern. I believe this is probably a bit divisive album and a period for them, because not everybody loves the Blondie and Ricky period. Personally, I love Blondie and Ricky. I love The Flame. I love that album that Carl produced for them. I believe it was released in 1970. I love that album. I love their songs and their style and the energy. And in the early 70s, Dennis injured his hand. He couldn't play the drums anymore, and they had to find a new drummer, so they hired Ricky Fataar, and with him also came Blondie Chaplin, the guitarist, and they incorporated them for the Beach Boys as full-time members. So they got songs on Carl and the Passions and Holland in 72 and 73. But I believe this album is sort of the pinnacle statement of that whole era. Because by 74, both of the guys had left, and Endless Summer came out and everything changed. But from like 70 or 71 to 73, they were just kicking ass on stage. 71, they were playing with the Grateful Dead at Fillmore East, and I love Grateful Dead. It's one of my favorite groups with the Beach Boys. Very interesting time period. Around this time, they weren't filling up stadiums or arenas even. They were performing at theaters and these sort of smaller venues, concert halls, and a lot of students in the audience, and a lot of that was because of the album Surf's Up that came out in 71, because Sunflower flopped completely, and the albums before that all flopped completely. Not in Europe. Europe they were still pretty big in the late 60s, but not in the States. But Surf's Ups changed everything in the States. It didn't really generate hit songs, but the album itself was a critical and commercial success. My dog is hog. My hog. Well, he looks like a hog. Dog is making weird sounds. Anyway, charted quite well on the album charts, and generally just people loved it, students loved it. It was very progressive and sounded modern, and Carl and the Passions flopped, but then again Holland was it had Sail on Sailor, which was a minor hit, so it did better. But anyway, like what they were really doing at this time period was that they were really improving their live stuff. Their shows were amazing, and I believe the word really spread. Young people started to get into them. I mean, there's a lot of people in the audience over here that weren't even, well, they probably were born, they were probably born in the early 60s, but they were not listening to the Beach Boys in the early 60s. They were probably like, I don't know, 5-year-olds or something, 6-year-olds. Most likely were not listening to the Beach Boys. You can see like 20-year-olds over here, or 17, 18-year-olds, whatever, like young people in the audiences. So they were sort of getting this sort of new appreciation from younger audiences that were into bands like Grateful Dead or Rolling Stones, you know. So anyway, things were changing, and you can hear over here a group that is hungry. They have a lot of energy. They are still young, and they have this sort of, because this is right at the edge of that new success that they would then get with the sales of Endless Summer, the compilation album. But they were, if you think about their career, they were pretty much instant smash hit with their surfing stuff. They went to the top, you know, then the Beatles came and they sort of started to diminish, and by the late 60s nobody was coming to their shows and stuff, you know, so then they had to really prove themselves each night. And by 72, 73 they were at that pinnacle of that hunger, and they were, because if you listen to the shows like the Late in Hawaii stuff, and you know, you can they are kind of sloppy, you know. I love that stuff, but they are kind of sloppy, you know. Even in the Live in London, they are relying a lot of, you know, that heavy lifting for the backing musicians. You have those horn sections, and over here, yeah, you got backing musicians. Actually, let's name them. You got Carly, Robert Kenyatta, Billy Hinchy, Carly Munoz, Mike Kowalski, Ed Carter. So, you know, not that many. You got 5 backing musicians. Freaking great album. Anyway, like, you know, the backstory is long, and, you know, 74 everything would change. So this is sort of the end of this period, which is sad, because, you know, without that, I mean, it's great when you have success, but it's just sad that the success came to the Beach Boys in the name of, you know, Endless Summer, in the sort of the, with the old stuff, you know. That's sad to me, that the success came with the old songs and not with a new hit or a new album. That's sad, because the albums all the way from Pet Sounds to Holland are just great after one another, and then after Endless Summer they sort of just lost it. But whatever, you know, that's a completely different story. Let's just dive straight into the track list itself. It doesn't, well, first of all, album cover cool, and I love how this sort of, this circular logo and the Brother Records logo with the Native American and the horse, sort of, this sort of became then the, you know, the classic Beach Boys concert. You see this all the time in their gear, those gear boxes and stuff, you know. Even on the 50th anniversary tour, this logo sort of became the you know, a classic thing. I love it. Anyway, inside in the gatefold you see a lot of cool stills of the guys. Back cover is a bit simple, you know, you don't have a track list over here, which is a shame. But all the guys look cool and I love it. So, you know, anyway, I have to take the albums to see the track list. Let's just move on. The album starts off with Sail on Sailor, which was a hit at the time, a minor hit at least. And Sail on Sailor is most definitely a grower. The first time I really got to know the song, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, because it is a bit repetitive. But as of now, I really love it. I think it just sounds better and better on each listen. And the version over here is, well, let's take this sleeve off. The version over here I feel could be even better than the studio one. And that's an interesting point that can be said of a lot of the songs over here. The Beach Boys are most well known of their, you know, they are not that well known of their live shows, but they are mostly well known of their great productions, their studio work. So basically completely opposite of, like, for example, Grateful Dead. But somehow over here on this album they are able to even improve on some of the studio recordings, which is very interesting to me. And not to say that the studio recording of Sail on Sailor or The Trader is bad, no, but somehow just the energy and something about these performances and arrangements really work. Anyway, then it's followed with Sloop John B, The Trader. Well, Sloop John B is a, you know, done in a very, you know, traditional Beach Boys way. But The Trader, great song by Carl, and I might even prefer this over the studio one, even though the studio one is great as well. But somehow he just lit up on stage. His vocals, lead vocals especially, on stage, a lot of times compared to, even though he's great on the albums, you know, too, but somehow just the audiences made him have just higher energy, and it just improved his voice. I don't know, you can hear it when he, probably the best examples are the sort of songs that are not necessarily that great. I for example love Keeping the Summer Alive, but if you listen to his vocals on stage singing that song compared to, you know, the studio recording, the energy level is like, it's 50% higher. You Still Believe in Me, I believe Al does the lead vocal over here. I think it's interesting that they do this sort of deep cuts off of pet sounds over here. They sort of don't really fit because most of this album is very hard rocking, so in a way they don't really fit here, but somehow they actually do. And You Still Believe in Me is a highlight, a great freaking song, and, you know, a great performance over here. And then side one ends with California Girls and Darling, both great performances, classic songs. Side 2 continues then with Marcella, and Marcella is an amazing song. The studio version, while I love it, it's just not rocking enough compared to this one. But the highlight for me is Dennis Wilson's backing vocals. He somehow, it's pretty much the only spot of this song where you can hear prominently Dennis, which is my biggest critique of this whole album, by the way. You got Dennis on the cover, and Dennis at his sort of pinnacle when it comes to his songwriting and, you know, singing. His voice is just great, youthful, still strong, not that raspy that it became a few years later. But you don't have a single Dennis song on the album. It's weird, but it's just one of those weird Beach Boys things. But here, listen, pump up the volume and listen to Marcella over here. It rocks so hard, and probably the hardest rocking thing the Beach Boys ever did. Dennis really just steals the show, even though he's just singing background vocals, but he's really into it. Listen to it. And then Caroline No, sang by Carl over here. Beautiful rendition, and the highlight of Pet Sounds album, one of the best songs Brian ever wrote. Leaving This Town, very interesting song by Blondie and Ricky. Well, there's also writing credits for Carl and Mike, but anyway, like mostly written by Ricky and Blondie. And it's a ballad. It's a sort of progressive ballad. Sounds very much like something Grateful Dead, for example, would do. It's a pretty long song. I love the organ solo. In the album you get synth solo, and over here you get like a 3-minute organ solo, and it is so cool. I love it. The drumming on that solo is great, and it sort of just lifts the song up. And I could listen to that solo go on for like 6 or 7 minutes. I love it. I believe you get on the Sail on Sailor a live version of this song with a guitar solo. Not sure, but I think you do. So, you know, you get like many different versions of the solo. But anyway, it doesn't sound like them trying to sound like something else. It sounds authentic, and it's their original song, and I love the song. Heroes and Villains is then at the end of side 2, and it's a great rendition of it. I actually prefer this one probably over the released single version, because this just rocks really well. Really like it. Great version. I actually wish there was a more Smile material over here. Like, you know, Serves Up or something, but whatever. Side 3 then starts off with Funky Pretty, and I love that song. It's the album closer of Holland, written by Brian and Mike and Jack Riley. And this one is very different from the version released on Holland, because the Holland version is a traditional sort of weird Brian Wilson production with very interesting, complicated background vocals and parts, and synthesizers and weird drum part. going on. It's kind of minimalistic in a way, but very traditional Brian Wilson production. But this one over here is just pure rocking track, and I love both versions. I cannot decide which one I prefer. But great song, highlight of Holland, really love it. Let the Wind Blow, highlight from the Wild Honey album, works really well over here. And it's the sort of song you want to just listen to in a dark room and just pump up the volume and you get into that mode, and it works so well. Help Me Rhonda over here is here sang by Al, but you get a version on the Made in California box set with a similar arrangement as is this one, but with Dennis singing the lead, and that works so well. But anyway, this version is great. It's bluesy, very different. You first don't really realize that it's Help Me Rhonda when it starts because the arrangement is so different, but it works so well. And I kind of wish that they'd done a similar thing with some of the other, old school tracks that they have at the end of the album on side 4. But it works so well, you wouldn't believe it, but it actually does. I really love it. Surfer Girl, great performance over here, but to me it's always just strange to hear Surfer Girl without Brian, because I know that Brian wrote most of these songs and he's absent. He didn't perform with the Beach Boys during this time period. So but somehow for me Surfer Girl is just the song that you kind of just have to have Brian if you want to play that. I don't know, but to me it just sounds weird to hear the rest of the Beach Boys but not Brian on that one. I don't know why, I don't have any rational explanation for it, but somehow it just feels so Brian to me, and then not having Brian on it is always a sort of weird thing. But it's a great performance and nothing wrong with it, but it's just my weird thing. And then side 3 ends off with Wouldn't It Be Nice? Great vocals by Al and the whole group. Mike, everybody. Great rendition. Side 4 then starts off with We Got Love, which is a super interesting track once again, written by Blondie and Ricky, and it also has writing credits by Mike. This one is a sort of country vibe. My voice is, by the way, kind of weird because I've been ill for a week or two, had high fever and stuff, some sort of cold, but my voice is sort of cracking. But We Got Love anyway, let's get back into it. It was originally supposed to be on Holland, but they swapped it for Sail on Sailor because the record company didn't want to release the album that they first offered with We Got Love, but they didn't include Sail on Sailor. They said that it's just not strong enough, there's no single material. And for the longest of time this version was the only officially released version of the song. I think it was like about 10 years ago they included the studio version on some sort of digital only version of Holland, and that was like the first time that people officially could listen to the studio version. And now you can hear it on the Sail on Sailor box set, for example. And to be honest, I always loved this song, and I was so disappointed when I learned that it was supposed to be in Holland but then it wasn't included, because I love it. I think it's so freaking great. But then I heard the studio version and I can kind of understand why they ditched it, because it's not that strong. The version over here is a lot stronger than the studio one. And starting off right from the opening guitar lick, that do 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 do, whatever. It's so freaking amazing. And I remember this one time I was walking or something, like having a walk, whatever, and it just kept playing in my head on a loop, just endless loop, that intro lick. And I was just kind of not singing, but sort of just listening to it. I was like, freaking, this is so great, what is this? And I remember thinking that's like one of the all-time classic guitar licks, and it just kept playing in my head and I couldn't remember the song. And then suddenly it came to me that it was actually We Got Love by the Beach Boys, and I was like, this unreleased gem basically by them. I know it's by Blondie and Ricky mostly, but it is still a Beach Boys song. And I was like, oh man, like come on, like this is so great, and it's so sad that people don't know this song. It sounds like Grateful Dead or whatever, you know, sort of country rock classic, and it's so disappointing that people don't know it. That it's just such an underrated song because it is so freaking great, especially the live version over here. But anyway, let's move on. The album then ends with a traditional Beach Boys medley sort of way with Don't Worry Baby, Surfing USA, Good Vibrations and Fun Fun Fun, and the versions over here are done in a very traditional Beach Boys way. There's really nothing super interesting to talk about them. All are performed well and sound excellent, and I love the way they do include at the end a few surfing songs. Well, Surfing USA and Fun Fun Fun, kind of Fun 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 is not a surfing song, but it has that same mood anyway. I think it's cool because if you were a fan of them and you were expecting to hear something from the old days, you know, I think it's great that you got a glimpse of that at the end, because most of the track list is not like, they are not relying on the you know, the mid 60s or early 60s hits that they were then sort of started to gravitate towards that sort of set list after Endless Summer. So they are playing so much deep cuts and recent songs, and I love that. But overall, I think this album, where's the cover over here, should be considered one of the all-time great rock and roll live albums, and it's sort of sad that it isn't considered as one, because I think it really blows out of the water a lot of live albums from the same period. And you know, in the early 70s they were playing with the Grateful Dead. They did a show with the Grateful Dead in Fillmore East 71, and they were just a great live group. They were hip, and they weren't trying to sound like something they were not. You know, they were so authentic with Blondie and Ricky. And after they left, it sort of just all fell apart. And then they did that tour with Chicago, which I believe probably was a pretty big success. I haven't listened to those tapes a lot, and there's nothing officially released. But I believe Dennis started to get into heavy cocaine use on that tour. The Chicago guys taught him how to, you know, really blow cocaine or something. I don't know, but you know, that's what I hear. And you know, drugs started to came around, and then you know, the money came with the Endless Summer. So they started to sell out arenas as stadiums, and then eventually they would bring Brian back, and you know, everything just changed. The sound changed, and you know, but it's a completely different story. But here you can hear them still sort of youthful and full of energy. Here it's just so amazing to hear them at that corner of that huge success that would then follow, you know. But it's just a sadness that success came with the, you know, with that with old songs, you know, with a compilation and not a new album, not a new hit song, because that kind of killed their creativity. Well, anyway, that's a completely different story once again. What do you think about the album? And I think I probably prefer this over all the other Beach Boys live albums. I do love the Networth show a lot, but I think this still blows it out of the water. But I just wish that they released all the shows, because I would love to hear more Dennis and all the different you know, renditions of the same songs. But you know, anyway, they played a lot of cool songs. They played Surf's Up during this time period as well, and other deep cuts, and you know, great live album, great time for the group, and probably like the pinnacle of them on stage. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.